The wait is over, ladies and gentlemen. The wait for the next random assignment episode is over. At long last, it has arrived. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bob Bowden with Choice Media, and my colleague there is Corey DeAngelis from American Federation for Children. Corey, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, especially with this news that just came out yesterday. And it's actually the image. All we have to do is, oh, look, the box is already checked for us. Do you support funding students over systems? Yes. The answer is yes.
Did you originate this phrase, students versus systems? Is this your brainchild?
I think so.
Okay. And to talk about it a little bit, I've never asked you this directly because it seems to have taken off, this concept, students versus systems. Tell me how you came up with it or what you think it means or what people ask you about it.
Well, the main reason I like to frame the conversation in this way is that it started to occur to me that we fund people directly with so many other programs like Pell Grants and GI Bill, the pre-K programs like Head Start and other taxpayer-funded pre-K programs. And then with other industries as well, we have food stamps, Section 8 housing vouchers, Medicaid dollars, and all these other programs. The funding goes to a person instead of a particular building or system. And that's the basis of my argument for school choice, is that we should be logically consistent. And if we support these other things, we should support the money going to the students as well when it comes to K through 12 education. So that's, I think, we have vouchers for all of these other services and levels of education, and no one has a problem with any of that. It's only when it comes to K through 12.
It's demonized. In fact, I made that point about 10 years ago in the Cartel movie. That word is demonized for just exactly one sector. Like if you talk about preschool, it's okay to let people get government money and select a private preschool. If you talk about universities, just as you pointed out with Pell Grants, that's okay. All these other sectors like Medicare, and we've talked about it a million times, food stamps and Section 8, like all these other sectors, it's fine. It's this, we're expected to believe that in this one exact area, which is K through 12 education only, it's somehow wrong. So, yeah.
The other benefit of talking about school choice in terms of funding students as opposed to systems is it automatically puts the other side on defense, and they all of a sudden have to figure out how to argue why we should fund the buildings instead of the students. It really puts them in an odd situation, especially when you start pointing out their logical inconsistencies when it comes to these other programs that they're totally fine with not going directly to a government building. But
we have news on polls regarding this very question. What's the news?
Yeah, so Real Clear Opinion Research polling came out yesterday, and I broke the news on Twitter with their latest poll on funding students as opposed to systems. Of course, their question is not, do you support funding students instead of systems? That's just how I talk about it. They framed it in terms of school choice, but consistently over time, we've seen an increase since April of 2020, a 10 percentage point increase in the latest polling, from 64% in April 2020 to 74% in June of 2021. The poll was actually in the field among registered voters last week. So this is super recent data, a 10 percentage point jump. And my argument, and I think your argument as well, has been that families are figuring out that there aren't any good reasons to fund the buildings when you can fund the students directly instead, especially after the past year where those buildings were closed and families were scrambling, not being able to find alternatives or having to pay out of pocket for those alternatives while those closed buildings sat around with their children's money.
And then update everybody. This comes on the heels of a different poll. Tell me if I'm jumping ahead, but so this just came out 8 days ago. This is a different story. It's Echelon Insights was the pollster in this particular example. Here they said 75% of Republicans, 60% of independents, and 61% of Democrats say they would strongly or somewhat support school choice. Interesting that Democrats had a higher percentage than independents in supporting school choice on that poll, but also a majority and numbers not so far from those you just cited, the Real Clear Politics.
Yeah, and with this poll that came out a couple of weeks ago that we have open right now, 16% said they were uncertain. So if you divide the amount of the people who actually had an opinion that responded favorable or unfavorable to school choice. If you divide by the base of 84% who actually had an opinion, that is about 77% of respondents favored school choice in the previous poll by Echelon Insights. But this Real Clear Opinion Research poll, if you only count the people who had an opinion, I said it before, it was a 74% approval, but it actually turns out to be about 82% if you divide by the 90% base. So out of the people who had an opinion, 82% supported school choice. Again, that was a huge jump from just about a year ago. And then I looked into the changes over time for different groups. The biggest change over time was for parents with kids in the public school system. 68% support in April 2020, June 2021, a week ago, 80%. That's a 12 percentage point jump, which is probably about a 16% relative jump. So it's a huge increase. Again, I think it's because this group of people in particular started to say, well, I don't want to feel powerless ever again. I don't want to be stuck in this predicament. And I think they found out that public schools really showed their true colors over the past year, and showed families that they didn't really care all that much about their kids, or at least they weren't able to figure out how to get the job done over the past year. And another big jump in support was among Democrats. 59% support in April of 2020, up to 70% support in June 2021. Republicans also saw a jump in support of 8 percentage points, with now 83% of Republicans nationwide supporting school choice.
Right. Now, I've said to you, Corey, and we've talked about it with my team at Choice Media and other people, I'm not a huge fan of polls generally, because I find the results are so easily skewed by how a question is posed. And this is a game that both sides play. We both know teachers' unions have their own polls all the time that they fund. Oftentimes, they get legitimate groups to actually do the calling, but in terms of the question design, it seems clear often the teachers' unions are involved in the question design. And so I always want to point this out so we don't sound like hypocrites. When we dismiss a teachers' union poll, oh, that's because they paid for it, their side versus our side. Oh, but when our side comes out with a poll, then we laud it and et cetera. So I don't want to sound like that. So there's the story about an Iowa poll, for example, that said majority oppose a new law allowing groups to form charter schools without school board oversight. And I tweeted about this. That really was kind of the framing of this question. In fact, they offered the question in some of these where they, in this article in particular, where it actually said, quote, it's about, do you favor or oppose, allow groups to form charter schools without approval from the local school board? In a question posed like that, it's just above the pie chart. In a question posed like that, all they say is something negative about the idea to the person receiving the phone call. That's all this. I would call that a highly biased structure for a poll question. If all you do is say a negative thing, you are leading the witness, as they'd say. A lawyer would say, "Objection, Your Honor, you're leading the witness." To me, and I think it's probably less biased to say something, maybe positive about one. The real way to do it is to say, here are two ideas, this idea or this idea. Which appeals more to you, A or B? That to me would be the best way to do a poll. But at the end of the day, I think we can spend this time. And look, I do appreciate, Corey, how much coverage sometimes, even just on social media, we get retweets for things like this when we post them. And I love it. I think it's obvious that everyone wants agency over their own life and choice over their own life. It doesn't want to be ordered by somebody else that they don't even know their name into some sort of educational paradigm for their kids. It's absurd to me that we even have to debate this question of whether we want some control of our lives. Whatever. I have these misgivings that we rarely convince new people with these kinds of polls. I think it mostly just gets the base from on either side to cheer.
Yeah, I will say though, when it comes to school choice, the school choice finding over time, the question is phrased in almost an identical way in each poll over time.
That's a fair point.
So you could, even if you argue about how the question was phrased, the bigger point here, I think that even people who disagree with us can come away with is, well, something's changing over time, and it's not the phrasing of the question. You may argue, maybe the 74% is higher than what another poll would have gotten, but you can't really argue with that upward trend in support for school choice over time, over the past year in particular.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and a different point.
And with that, there's also some other good news in a couple of other states that have happened over the past week. One is New Hampshire. New Hampshire's governor, Sununu, signed a budget bill which includes education freedom accounts. It's the first EFA, education freedom account, that I've heard of anywhere that's been passed. This is, I want to say this is the 10th education savings account program in the nation now. And just before this year, we only had 5 education savings accounts. So we've doubled education savings accounts in the country over the past year. So that's some more evidence that people, or at least legislators, are more likely to support school choice this past year. And as I noted in the tweet, this will be the second most expansive education savings account program in the nation. So New Hampshire is doing it right. They started with a universal bill that was going to be available to everybody, but they watered it down a little bit to be about half of the population, which is still pretty good. I'm sure they'll expand their program forward. But look, this is the second biggest, most expansive eligibility-wise ESA in the country. And then Pennsylvania's governor, who is not friendly to school choice typically, signed a budget bill today that included an expansion of their existing tax credit scholarship program, which is the largest ever expansion of their education improvement tax credit scholarship program in Pennsylvania. I think this will provide an additional 15,000 students with scholarships, is what they're estimating in Pennsylvania from this expansion. I think the Republicans wanted a bigger expansion. They wanted about a $100 million expansion of this program, but I think they ended up only getting about 40 million expansions, which is, it's better than nothing. And then lastly, with all of the state action, there's one more state, and I'm sure you saw all of this, Bob, on Twitter, was Arizona. Arizona had Senate Bill 1452 that passed.
Let me just interrupt to say, I'm actually kind of
cool.
looking forward to this, because you're about to. Sometimes people say, "Oh, well, you got to be able to call out your own side if your own side isn't doing the right thing. Don't be a partisan hack. You got to be, if you say you're nonpartisan, that means you got to be able to call out.
You're not on my side if you don't vote for school choice. I don't care what party you are."
And you are about to prove that. Go ahead with Arizona.
Yeah, so Arizona has Senate Bill 1452 passed through their Senate strictly along party lines, and then it went to the House and it had some trouble. I heard some whispers about why there was trouble, but nothing was really public until 5 days ago. There was an amendment to the budget in Arizona, their education budget bill, to add in what was included in Senate Bill 1452, which would have been the largest expansion of school choice in Arizona history. It was going to take their existing education savings account program, which is available to about a fifth of the school-age population, and it was going to over triple that to about 70% of the school-age population by some estimates. It was going to open it to kids that were in Title I schools and veterans, in addition to students with special needs. And they put it to a vote, and it did not pass. It was a 28-28 vote. And the reason for that was because 3 Republicans, Michelle Udall, Joel John, and Joan Osborne, joined the Democrats in voting against school choice. If you go to my tweet, you can see the actual vote count, 28-28 with 4 not voting. And if those 3 Republicans would have voted for school choice, this would have passed. It would have been the biggest expansion of school choice in Arizona history. And look, school choice is part of the Republican Party platform. It doesn't look like some people are sticking to that platform.
And so you tweeted those members directly, didn't you? The Republicans who voted against school choice.
Yeah, and I voted for. I listed everybody here who voted for it, and called out the 3 Republicans for voting against it, because they blocked school choice for low-income students in the form of education savings accounts this past year. It's horrible for those students. I mean, the biggest losers here are the low-income students who would have benefited from this huge expansion of school choice in Arizona. So who knows what will happen going forward, but I think people might start paying attention a bit more, especially on the conservative side, to how their representatives are or are not representing their values when it comes to educational freedom.
Okay, so moving on, I wanted to talk about, we're starting to get some evidence now of how some of the massive billions of dollars of COVID school money is being spent. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of it wasted, at least in this example, coming from Tennessee. So this is a story, and the headline is a quote that's rather provocative. My kids have been stolen from. But in fact, the story shows that they now have some money that have, some data, in other words, that's come through on what actually was being spent. They actually show invoices from the school district, the Metro Schools, Nashville school districts in Tennessee. They have the invoices, and they talk about $2 million went to purchase infrared cameras for temperature checks. Now, okay, so let's be clear. This is, the people, schools have never been super spreading locations for COVID. There has never been any medical evidence to suggest that the kids get COVID virtually at all. But what we're finding out now is that all of this money is rolling into all of these groups. So I'm sorry, I was about to list. There was random COVID testing, in other words, tests bought, and compliance officers, and also compliance officers hired to do things like monitor social distancing, like right now. In other words, they're hired now to, whenever for summer school or next school year, like do things like monitor social distance when COVID is ending in the United States. Now, if there's something changes, that would be different. But the idea that these $30 million, this says here regarding Nashville, it's the quote here, if someone took time to realize it's actually a $30 million undertaking, Nashville got it for a steal, said Johnson, who was the vice president of this of this group that got the, I guess, Meharry Medical College Senior Vice President Patrick Johnson insists the no-bid contract saved the district money. This no-bid contract for, I suppose, $30 million. But people are looking at it saying, we don't need this stuff. They're kids that actually need better educations, and we're blowing all kinds of money on COVID protections that will do no one any good, because the kids aren't catching COVID anyway. And generally, COVID in all of the United States is rapidly heading downward.
They have more money than they know what to do with, Bob. What are they supposed to do? They still got the American Rescue Plan funds that they haven't touched. Yeah.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? How are they going to have to? It's almost kind of like on the
You're going to give it back?
That's what I'm asking. On the one hand, they could spend it on COVID-related expenses because that's on the basis they were justified when we all know COVID is quickly ending, unless something changes. They could spend it on unnecessary COVID protections and waste it that way. Or they could go spend it on something else that it was never authorized for.
No, Bob.
I don't know which is more likely.
It's like everything's infrastructure. Everything is COVID relief. So they're just going to put more people into the buildings, which is what they always wanted all along. It's what they always do, is just put more people into the buildings, which is great for the teachers' unions because it means more dues-paying members and more political power for future hostage-taking situations to extort even more money from the taxpayers in the future. They're going to do that. I mean, we see the plans in Los Angeles. And I tweeted about this the other day. In Los Angeles, I started looking into their budget numbers and I could not believe it. I was sitting there for hours just making sure I had this right because I did not want to share the information if it wasn't right. And just at first it didn't pass the sniff test. I knew there were going to be increases in per pupil funding in 2021, 2022. I didn't think it was going to be this much. A 69% increase since 2019 in Los Angeles public schools, from $15,600 per kid to over $26,000 per kid. And I think that's excluding a bunch of stuff. I just took their numbers at face value in the budget, which is like a 300-page document, but they at one point in the middle of the document put per pupil funding numbers. I don't think, because if you take the $20 billion budget and divide it by their 620,000 students in Los Angeles, it actually comes out to like 32,000 instead of 26,000. But I wanted to be cautious and just use the lower number.
Yeah.
But it's still alarming.
Well, right.
It's 69%.
I mean, I wonder how much of that increase is
years.
allegedly COVID-related spending of that increase versus other things that they just say, well, oh, look, now the kid has a laptop because we had to do remote learning last year, but that laptop will also help with education in other ways or something that's at least not, COVID sensors or something. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to break that down. I have a feeling that'd be pretty opaque numbers.
They
hard to do that.
In what was it? The Los Angeles Times. I got some numbers from district officials on what they expect to do with staffing over the next year. These aren't final numbers in Los Angeles, but they did give these numbers. They're losing thousands of students in the 2021-2022 school year, and they have been for a couple of years now. They're losing more this year, they expect, but they say, oh, well, we're going to add 8% more teachers, 25% more custodial workers, and 80% more psychiatric, psychologist type of social workers. So again, we knew this was going to happen. They're just using the funding is what they expect to do. These aren't final numbers yet, but huge increases in staffing. And of course, that's what the unions want.
Sure. And they also have the public believing in many cases that spending in and of itself is some sort of public good. Oh, look at this. We spent more on the kids. Isn't that wonderful? Let's applaud. That's like, oh, wow. Isn't it great? We're spending more on the kids.
They're spending it on the adults. If they cared about the kids, they give the money straight to the kids. They don't care about the kids.
Yeah.
Give it to the families.
All right, let me mention, I have a whole bunch of video, a lot of on the culture war stuff. Let's start with the transgender debates. And we just came across this video. It's the one, Jenna Powell, that I sent you, if you have that video ready. So this is a representative in the State House in Ohio who got up to make an amendment. And her amendment was to say something controversial, something to say that maybe sports designed for females in public schools, both college and high school sports designed for females, should ban biological males from competing against females in these sporting contests. And then this played out. That kind of went mini viral as the video. Listen for the reaction once Jenna Powell starts talking.
Mr. Speaker, I move to amend with Amendment 1594.
The chair has the amendment. The amendment appears to be in order. The representative may proceed.
Wonderful. The Save Women's Sports Act is a fairness issue for women to be able to achieve their dreams in athletics in our state. And it's crucial to preserving women's rights and the integrity of women's and girls' sports. Across our country, female athletes are currently losing scholarships, opportunities, medals, education, and training opportunities. This amendment will require schools that are part of the OHSAA to designate separate teams for participants of the biological sex. No school interscholastic conference or organization that regulates interscholastics shall permit biological males to participate on athletic team or an athletic competition designated only for biological female participants. Currently, OHSAA allows biological males to compete against biological females if they either completed a year of hormone therapy, demonstrated they do not possess physical.
Please state what rule, constitutional provision, or statute has been violated.
What was happening?
For yelling point of order, they were trying to basically just interrupt her by just banging and banging and banging. And so this was, Mike Skindell was one of the legislators. There's other video that's available on Twitter that we didn't post on Choice Media, but shows the guy Mike Skindell banging on the desk.
That's another representative?
Another legislator there, yes. And they were just screaming. And in other words, basically they were responding like some sort of toddler having a tantrum.
Yeah.
I don't know on what basis this fosters any kind of, put it this way. This is kind of, you lose independence with this stuff. People that are not aligned either way, and you see one side behaving like tantruming children, in my opinion, is great for the side that's not behaving like tantruming children. At any rate,
she just kept reading. She just kept talking.
Right. At the bottom line is her amendment ended up passing and was victorious. So Ohio has banned biological males from competing in sports deemed as sports contests for females in the high schools and college athletics. So her amendment passed despite this ruckus.
And it got placed into the budget. Right?
Let's see. It was an amendment. Yes, it was. It was an amendment to an original bill. Let's see. I don't have the name of. I'm not sure. Was it the budget? It could have been some other bill. But
anyway. I know they were just working. They just came to an agreement with the committee of conference on the budget in Ohio. I think Jason Bedrick tweeted out some good news out of Ohio when it comes to school choice too. It's something I didn't go over because it hasn't been officially passed by the legislature in Ohio, but the governor intends to sign it, and they've already made an agreement in the committee of conference that includes significant expansions of the state's school choice policies. Bedrick calls it a huge win, and someone on the ground there, Yitz Frank, who is the president of School Choice Ohio, has pointed out that it's going to be a micro grant or ESA for $500 for all kids below 300% of the federal poverty line. They're going to expand eligibility for their voucher program and increase the amount of funding that families can take with them to the school that works best for them. And they also came to an agreement with the new tax credit scholarship program. And I'm hearing that there's more included as well, but a significant amount of expansion of educational freedom in Ohio too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you want to do a story now, or should I keep going with the?
You do have a lot of videos, but I do have some real quick from. Okay. If you want to see the ratio of the day on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
We have. There was this summit called the Aspen Summit. Bob, have you been to that Aspen Ideas Summit?
No,
I have not, but. They wrote about how they had Randy Weingarten there. Look at the headline: Aspen Ideas Fest. Education advocate discusses classroom inequity. Return to school. How about you just call her who she is? The president of the AFT or the president of the teachers union? Education advocate. This is a union advocate, not an education advocate. But a lot of people started responding, and of course I had to as well. If you look at the biggest ratio on Twitter, it is 1.4 thousand replies, 7 likes, and most of these likes are people who follow me and who aren't agreeing with her. So I don't know why it's not.
They probably accidentally hit the, or maybe that's an ironic like or something.
1,400 replies, but the thing is, she's trying to gaslight the public again with this. This person with like 100 followers said something. Like 1,000 likes and said, this is ridiculous that you're trying to talk about reopening and recovering when you're the one that kept the schools closed. She replied by saying, well, we tried to reopen schools safely since April 2020, ... And there's just, if you want to have a field day with fun replies, go check it out because everybody knows she's lying. And if she wasn't lying, if she really was trying her hardest to reopen the schools, then the schools that you're in charge of are incompetent at best, and the private schools were able to figure it out a long time ago. You guys have been trying for way too long to open the schools, but everybody knows that they were not trying to reopen the schools. They were trying to keep them closed to extort the taxpayers as much as possible.
And if someone doesn't know that they were trying to keep them closed to extort taxpayers as much as possible, they can look at the list I tweeted of 8 different locations around the country where not just teachers union generally, but her union in all 8 instances, and all after April 2020, the date she just gave in that tweet. Her union tried to keep schools closed through lawsuits, through refusal to urgings, telling teachers not to show up for work, like in Philadelphia, to et cetera, all other kinds of legal gimmickry. So yes.
And I just replied with a bunch of pictures of things that happened over the past year with the teachers unions fighting against yeah, that's not a nice one. But the union in DC, fake body bags outside. I mean, everybody knows what's happened over the past year. I think one of my favorite replies that I can't find right now was someone said something like, my friend tried to lose weight last year, but then they kept eating hamburgers or something, like pretty much saying like, you're saying you're trying, but you're not actually trying.
Oh, I see.
And someone else was like, yeah, it's kind of like when a kid says that they're trying to clean their room, but then they find every other thing to do before actually cleaning the room. Yeah. You're saying one thing, but you're not actually doing it.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's see here. Let me move on to the some of this video I have on this what they call the critical race theory stuff. Now, look, this is an issue that's become pretty controversial, not just between from education reform types or parents against the teachers or the districts trying to sort of push this critical race theory. It's not just a battle there. It's also within the education reform community. As you know, Corey, there are divisions here. There are people that are mad at each other. I wanted to kind of address this through a few things. So first of all, Becky Pringle is the head of the largest teachers union in America, which is also the largest union in America, the National Education Association. She went on CBS and was asked a question about this. And I think her answer kind of frames up a lot of what you're about to hear in the rest. So let's hear from Becky Pringle.
This is what I know about my students. When you teach them the truth, they have the creative imaginations about what they can actually do to make a difference so that they can actually confront the injustices that have been built into every social system within this country. We should never underestimate our students' ability to not only learn about the complete and rich history of this country, but to come together with their shared stories and make sure that they have the opportunity to be those problem solvers we need them to be so we can confront the institutional racism that this country lives with every single day. And it's not just about history. It's about right now, as we very well know.
Okay, so there she is presenting this. This is something that we need to confront. It feels more like opinion, of course, than it does just objective discussion of what kids, might learn in a curriculum to me. But at any rate, we're seeing the downstream of this, actual teachers then implementing this ideology sometimes in Zoom calls that get captured on video. And then these teachers might make the mistake of saying out loud what they really intend to be said just in person. So in Portland, Oregon, there was such a teacher. So take that Becky Pringle version you just heard. That's kind of done for the media. It's a softer version of what this is. And then let's hear from the Portland teacher who offers I'll call it a more strident version.
Catherine Watkins, 8th grade humanities teacher at Cedar Park Middle School, and my pronouns are she, her, we, and us. I'm going to say something that's not nice and not sweet, but it's true. If you're not evolving into an anti-racist educator, you're making yourself obsolete in this field of profession. Our district is only getting browner and browner with our children. And so if, obviously you can't change your melanin, all right, but you can change your mind so that you can actually function in a district that is full of BIPOC children. So if you're being resistant, I understand that, but you're going to have to eventually come to the light, because if you're going to keep with those old views of colonialism, it's going to lead to being fired, because you're going to be doing damage to our children, trauma. And so as we fire the teachers who sexually abuse our children, we will be firing the teachers who do racist things to our children, traumatize them. And while our district might not be completely on there, OEA is working on it. All right, NEA is working on it. And so it's just a matter of time. So it's like you either evolve or dissolve. You've got to start walking with us.
Better get in line or you will be fired. She says right there. She says not, and even if our district is not fully in line with our definition of what racism is and what critical race theory is, although she wouldn't have used that term, even if our district is not in line with us, OEA is working on it. That's the Oregon Education Association. NEA is working on it. We just saw Becky Pringle a second ago from the NEA union.
Is it NEA having a meeting in the next couple of days where they're going to vote on how to deal with CRT in schools?
Yeah. But I'm saying this stuff is rolling out now, and what you're having is, in many cases, at school board meetings, we've shown some videos on this show before, people erupting at school board meetings. In some cases, they're being told not to talk about this, or they shut down public comment. There was one example in Pennsylvania where an actual former school board member came to the lectern and was lecturing the current school board members on free speech in America. And it was over this issue on whether the public should be silenced or whether censored or somehow quelled or their comments eliminated on the subject of critical race theory. And so let's listen to this former school board member with a British accent, but he's a Pennsylvania former school board member.
Your power does not supersede that of the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment rights of the citizens of this great nation. Let's be very, very clear who has the power.
Mr.
It is
Campbell,
not government policy. Do not warn me or do not interrupt my time.
That if you
interrupt my
make
time,
personal insults like that again, or if you personally direct your comments, you will be asked to step away from the podium.
I'm going to quote to you, solicitor. I'm quoting, just a minute. Do not talk over me. This is my comment, not your comment. I'm quoting to you now from the United States Supreme Court 1964 case, New York Times versus Sullivan. This is constitutional case law in this country, and I'm quoting you from the U.S. Supreme Court. The judges wrote that this nation is founded on the, quote, profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues shall be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials. That's constitutional case law in this nation. I don't have to be nice to you. Nobody behind me has to be nice to you. If you don't like living in the United States of America, then you can all move to Russia, Cuba, or China. This is the First Amendment. And I will caution you, solicitor. There is a video camera to my left. If you edit this tape, then you're going to have a big legal problem on your hands, because my right to critique your fascism, which is what this is constitutionally protected. There are emails, public record emails, in which the Director of Equity is lobbying and advocating for public comment to be censored in this school district. And you know what? Lobbying for it, advocating for it. We've got the school board president saying she'll do better at hitting the mute button in blatant violation of the Constitution for her lobbying and her advocacy of unconstitutional censorship. I want you, the school board, to terminate the employment of Dr. Charissa Gibson with immediate effect.
Okay. So it kind of gives you a little jolt there, huh?
Woo!
Jolt of energy.
His last statement should have been, I want you to give me my children's education dollars so I can take it somewhere else and shop somewhere else. That should have been he can call for whatever he wants. He needs to end it on, we need school choice.
Right.
Maybe some point they'll all get there.
So what the other side says, this is what I see, is they either say critical race theory doesn't exist and isn't being taught in schools at all, or they say whatever you're observing in schools, you're calling it the wrong name. If you use the name critical race theory, that's the wrong name. It cannot be called anything. Essentially, if you call it something, you're calling it by the wrong. There is no connective tissue. Maybe you see one thing happen in your school district, but there's no connection between that and any other national sort of observable thing that's happening. In other words, the definition is so vague that it is essentially unusable. And, Christopher Rufo is a guy that I think decided to coin what had been a term in law schools called critical race theory and use that as an umbrella term to describe many of these things we're seeing here, where oftentimes kids are taught that people with certain skin color are oppressors and people with other skin colors are victims, and they're taught this. And Christopher Russo and some others wanted to call this something, but the other side keeps saying, well, that's the wrong term. You can't use this term. I found something that I thought was interesting. So this is a law school professor at UCLA, an expert that if you can find the link that I sent you, it's from the Connecticut Law Review. And it's a PDF that I sent you before. Oh. This, I think, that's it. And if you scroll down to, I believe, page 9 on that, there's a particular reference that I thought was really instructive in terms of this issue of defining critical race theory. It's an indented part at the bottom of page, confirming here, yes, bottom of page 9. And I'm jumping around on different windows. So the part that says CRT, the very bottom, and then it goes to the next page. CRT is not so much an intellectual. Now listen, this is the person helping define this term. We've all wondered, right? The whole premise of this piece is critical what? And now this is going to help us define it. Here we go. This is from a law professor who's an expert in this subject. Critical race theory is not so much an intellectual unit filled with stuff, theories, themes, practices, and the like, but one that is dynamically constituted by a series of contestations and convergences pertaining to the ways that racial power is understood and articulated in the post-civil rights era. In the same way that Kendall Thomas reasoned that race was better thought of as a verb rather than a noun, I want to suggest that shifting the frame of CRT toward a dynamic rather than static reference would be a productive means by which we can link CRT's past to the contemporary moment. Well, thank you, Professor. This is Kimberly Crenshaw. Thank you, Professor Crenshaw, the law professor at UCLA, for helping us understand the dynamic nature of CRT's definition, which is, this is another part, I think, of the quiet part being, if not said out loud, written out loud, where they say pretty much it is a series of contestations and convergences pertaining to the ways that racial power is understood and articulated. Thank you for that clarity. The point is that I think what the other side is trying to do is say that you can't call these things. So for example, KIPP, the charter school, one of the largest charter school operators in the country, for 20 years had a phrase called work hard, be nice. Last year, 2020, they dropped the phrase, about a year ago, they dropped the phrase work hard, be nice. They decided that work hard was an example of whiteness. We found the same thing from a Bill Gates funded course that just came out this year. So I sent that to you as a Facebook image.
I do have the images. Is this?
Okay. So this is that's it right there. This is a group called equitableMath.org. Now, I would ask my friends who are sympathetic to critical race theory if they would defend this language. This was their original language. They ended up editing it, and I tweeted about that. But this is the first version. Okay, you ready? We found this on page 69 of this one chapter out of 5 chapters of these long ways to teach teachers how to not be racist in math class. That's the point of this document. And they say white supremacy on this page 69 here. White supremacy culture shows up in math classrooms when ... the focus is on getting the right answer. So the right answer is branded as white supremacy culture. One would wonder if the Gates Foundation paid for this. Gee, if a Microsoft engineer has a calculator in Microsoft Windows that produces the wrong answer, would they say, oh, well, you should allow that bad calculator to be put into Windows because getting the right answer is white supremacy, and we can't just focus on getting the right answer. They paid for this. They then, now if you have the other image, they then amended their language, which we found, and I thought was interesting. They tempered the language. Instead of what they had before, this edited version, yes, instead of focusing on getting the right answer, it's now there's a greater focus on getting the right answer than understanding concepts and reasoning. Oh, they're going to back off that a little bit. I think it's all racist to say whiteness is associated with the right answer. I mean, they're saying this. This sounds like something someone in the Klan would say. Like, what are we supposed to believe? That people of color are associated with the wrong answer. I mean, it seems, I can't believe that the Gates Foundation funded stuff like that. But my larger point is that when the other side says any of this should be called something, and Christopher Rufo came up with the term critical race theory. Well, he borrowed the term. Mm-hmm. He applied the term. I put it that way. What they say is that, oh, that term is wrong, and every other term is wrong. That this is actually just a hoax, a conspiracy. It doesn't exist. It's not there. But we're seeing this. We're seeing Kip change the language. We're seeing documents like this. And so, yes. So Terry McAuliffe,
I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the issue is two groups talking past each other. And it's all about just how people are defining CRT. And I think you're right that a lot of parents who are showing up to school board meetings are just upset about specific things that are happening in the schools. And perhaps if we just talked about this is the specific thing, or if the defenders of what's going on in the schools will just accept that, yeah, we understand what you're talking about, but it's not technically CRT, but we understand what you're talking about. If we can all just be on the same page to see,
are we allowed to call it something then? Should we do then maybe they should come up with a new term for what, I mean, the Smithsonian Institution last year identified objectivity with whiteness. The idea that you can look at a subject and you can approach it objectively. That objectivity was whiteness. So we have these things happening like this document, like the Kip language, like the Smithsonian Institution. People are looking for something to call it, and the other side says, they either say you can't call it anything, or they say it's just completely a hoax. It's not even, none of it's even there. So I bring this up to say that Terry McAuliffe, who is the former DNC chairman, he's now running for governor in Virginia. He was asked on the campaign trail, he was asked, what about this critical race theory that's going on in the classrooms? What do you say about that? He says it's all a conspiracy theory. He basically dismisses all of it. So let's listen to that.
So I, listen to what you're saying about education. I was just wondering, like, with all the Republicans are talking about like critical race theory, and they're making this huge deal about it, and it's all the conversation in the news with Virginia. Like, what are you going to say to all those people making education about that?
That's another right-wing conspiracy.
Okay.
This is totally made up by Donald Trump and Glenn Youngkin. This is who they are. It's a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
And you know what people want to know about? Why are we not paying our teachers? Why are we down 1,000 teachers today?
So they say it's a conspiracy. He says anyway, it's a conspiracy theory. It's not even there at all. So what is this thing with the Kip language, with the Gates Foundation document, with the Smithsonian Institution? One other thing they say is they'll also use what's called a straw man, Corey. Yeah. The idea that, I don't know, one spouse might say, hey, let's take a picnic this summer. Do you think that'd be a good idea? And the other spouse says, you mean we have to go outside every single day all summer and eat, whether it's raining or not? No, I didn't say that. Yeah, right. Straw man, you change the other person's argument to make them look dumb, right? That's the concept of it. Yeah. So we have people like on a Juneteenth celebration. This is in Atlanta, Georgia. So Umar Johnson is a public figure. He calls himself a Pan-African. In terms of ideology, he calls himself the Prince of Pan-Africanism, as a matter of fact. And Umar Johnson is telling people that when states are banning critical race theory, they're banning the teaching of slavery.
Ooh. I don't know if you've been paying attention, brothers and sisters, but there's a movement in this country right now that wants to eliminate the teaching of slavery forever from America's public schools. Texas, and I believe Arizona or Minnesota, a few other states that you have to double check. They're passing laws right now making it illegal to teach children about slavery. That's why I'm concerned about Juneteenth becoming a holiday the day before yesterday, because I can see the federalization of Juneteenth as an opportunity for the government to co-opt the narrative so they can control what our children understand Juneteenth to have been. I said they may have given us a holiday so they can kill the holiday.
I haven't seen any of the bills say that you cannot teach about the history of slavery.
It's absurd. And yet this is not somebody in their basement with a tinfoil hat. This is a large event in a major city with a bunch of people all gathered there with a big venue, a big stage, someone explaining that Texas has passed a law to make it illegal to teach kids about slavery. So this is where we are in this debate. I don't know. I've been filibustering too much, but
yeah. Well, I think although these bills aren't saying you cannot teach about slavery, I don't think these bills are the way to go either. I don't think that banning certain concepts or mandating certain concepts are the way to go, because one size fits all solutions don't work for everybody. But these bills in particular, we don't even know what we're defining here, what we're actually mandating or prohibiting. So I think it could get really messy with implementation on how it actually turns out. And so I don't think that's the way to do it. I think conservatives are starting to see over the past year what's happened in the classroom. And they think that there's political indoctrination, which there is in a lot of schools. And I think conservatives as a whole, not all, but overall, haven't paid enough attention to what's going on in the schools. And the left has been more likely to capture the school boards. And the knee-jerk reaction by conservatives has been, I don't like what's going on. I'm just gonna try to do a quick solution, which is to ban it, whatever I don't like, or whatever concepts they're seeing in the classroom that they don't like.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I'll agree with you on one thing.
It's a quick quote unquote solution, but I don't think it's the right solution. I think the better solution is start fighting with the school boards and pushing back on certain things that you don't think should be included in the classroom. Not try to do this like broad brush approach, but then also fight for school choice. Let people vote with their feet. Provide bottom up accountability to the public schools, and then maybe the public schools will focus more on math and reading and writing, and maybe they'll be less likely to teach in a biased way.
Well, I would say this. I don't mind certain legislation that's completely bland and innocuous in language, saying things like, we will not teach children that they should be considered either victims or oppressors based on their skin color. Like if it's a sort of something blank, like that's innocuous like that, I think that could be healthy. In terms of giving parents at school board meetings something to cite when they see evidence to the contrary. So I'm not against that per se. I take your point though, and I think also it's also fair to say that the issue is it's good red meat for the Republican base. Let's face it, or the conservative base, whether Republican or not. I think there's plenty of Democrats who are upset about this too, and by the way, including people of all color. And we've shown racial diversity with respect to clips of people who are angry about critical race theory in schools on this program. So that said, I do think the red meat aspect does create a scenario where the Fox Newses and there is a perhaps an instinct to make it seem like every single teacher in every single classroom is doing this white people are evil stuff, and it's clearly not true. I think there are places where it has been found, and they tend to blow up in these kinds of social media moments. But I would just say to you that there is something that has changed in the last 2 years, we'll call it, with respect to this issue. And I think the idea that if you call it something, it's the wrong term, cannot be the official response from school districts. It's a bad response for the left to stick with that. How dare you call this anything version? That's not what they say literally, of course. But I think it's okay to call it something. It's okay to use this term that even if it wasn't the original intent of critical race theory, it was, please, this.
So people understand what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Something has happened. I think it's terrible that Kip dropped their work hard, be nice. I think that's, I'm stunned by that. And I think we should be able to talk about that. If people want to talk about it, and school boards shouldn't censor people, that's to parents, etc. But anyway, all that said, so I do appreciate you tend to have this, and oftentimes you have a let's call it a 30,000 feet approach to this. We're going back to school choice and being like, we don't need to be having these fights, folks.
Well, you can apply the same argument, the same conversation to any type of curriculum. It doesn't have. This is the same argument they can make about any type of curriculum. You know, the social emotional learning stuff. The how much should we focus on the basics? People are going to disagree about these things, and that's okay.
How much to track excellent students versus combine them with the regular population, all those issues. Yeah.
The way that I put it on Newsmax the other day was, just imagine if we were all residentially assigned to a government-run grocery store. We all had to fight with each other at board meetings about what one-size-fits-all package of goods that everybody must have. You'd have the vegan lobby coming in. You'd have the meat lobby coming in and arguing for a certain mix of goods, and everybody would get something, but it would be extremely costly, and a lot of people would get what they wouldn't like, and there would be a lot of fighting, needless fighting over all these things, when instead I can just go to the grocery store and pick out what I want. That's how it should be with K-12 education as well. We shouldn't have to fight to force other people to have the mix of curriculum that you think is best for everyone. Maybe one size doesn't fit all when it comes to curriculum.
As I said before, Corey's key phrase is fund students, not systems. Bob Bowden's key catchphrase is one size fits all systems cause fights. So yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, it's another analogy I like to give is, what if they ran higher education this way? What if you were assigned to the closest public university, and your Pell Grant or any of your scholarship you got could only go to that closest, and you were told if you went to a different university, you'd be draining money from the closest public university to your home or wherever they decide to draw the lines in the map. How much sense would that make to anybody? I'm not sure anybody would endorse that. And yet we're told that has to be the way we do K through 12. Why? Because there's some magic difference if the student is 19 versus 17? Anyway.
I had one more piece of data that just came out from the federal government. I think it's National Center for Education Statistics. They have preliminary data for the 2020-2021 school year on enrollment counts. Every state provided data except for Illinois. They couldn't figure it out. But from the data that they got, they're finding about a 3% drop in enrollment, and the 74 did some quick math on that and said that's estimated about a 1.5 million student drop in public school enrollment across the United States.
Yeah, I'm surprised it wasn't. I mean, 3%. I'm surprised it wasn't more. But anyway.
Yeah, well, some states are more than others. I mean, they pointed out how, they have a map here with some states losing more than others. Some are, above 4%. But yeah, it's typically like 2 to 5%, pretty consistently. But yeah, families are voting with their feet right now, and a lot of them might not come back.
Yeah. All right. Well, a bit of sad news. We won't have random assignment next week, as it will be the official Choice Media summer break. So we will ask our loyal viewers to binge watch previous episodes or the rest of our YouTubes on Choice Media. But anyway, that's all. I mean, as you can see from the new clock in the set, it's now past the hour mark. So that's all we got from here.
Yeah, thank you all so much for checking out the latest episode of Random Assignment with Bob Bowden and Corey DeAngelis. And have a great 4th of July this weekend.